Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely huge, the outcomes of the IMO's Maritime Safety Committee 111th session, or MSC 111 for short. If you're anywhere near maritime operations, shipbuilding, or honestly just love seeing how massive global industries adapt to crazy new tech, you're in the right place. We are literally watching the rulebooks get rewritten in real time to handle ships that sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. It's a real turning point. So here's our roadmap for building the ship of the future. We'll start with a quick welcome to MSC 111, dive into the MAS code for autonomous shipping, then look at fueling the green transition. After that, we'll upgrade some mandatory safety rules and finally lay out the timeline to the future. Section 1. Welcome to MSC 111. The big theme here is simple, but man, is it profound. Maritime technology is evolving at breakneck speed, and the international regulatory framework is in an absolute sprint to keep up. To really grasp the scale of the challenge the IMO faced during this session, I want you to think about this for a second. How do you regulate a massive cargo ship with literally zero crew on board? For centuries, right, maritime law has revolved entirely around the human element, the captain, the crew, the physical hands on the wheel. But suddenly we've got these futuristic ghost ships hitting the waters, and the historical rulebook, it just doesn't apply anymore. Moving to Section 2, the MAS code, autonomous shipping. All right, let's dive into this and start building the brain of our future ship. The absolute cornerstone of MSC 111 is the adoption of a brand new regulatory framework for MAS. Now, let's de-jargonize that right off the bat. MAS stands for Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships. Essentially, we're talking about ships operating with remote control and autonomous functions. And to be clear, this isn't just about fully robotic, completely uncrewed ships. It also covers individual autonomous functions on vessels that might actually still have a crew on board doing other things. Think about a modern autonomous vessel. It relies on this invisible, highly complex web of digital connectivity. It needs incredibly robust cybersecurity and totally seamless data exchange. So the new MAS code was built to be entirely goal-based and technology neutral. Basically, it's designed to ensure these floating computers operate safely and securely without boxing engineers into rigid, outdated tech constraints. So how do these new rules of the road actually work in practice? Well, a few key things. First, the MAS code applies strictly to cargo ships, so no passenger vessels just yet. It requires really rigorous risk assessments for approval. But honestly, the most vital takeaway here is about leadership. Under this code, a human master remains ultimately responsible for the ship. That master might be sitting in a remote operations center, an ROC, thousands of miles away, but they absolutely must have the ability to intervene. The code actually governs how these ROCs interact with the ships and requires them to be certified by the flag administrations. Section 3, fueling the green transition. We've built the brain of our ship, so now let's build the heart, the propulsion systems of the future. What's super interesting here is how the IMO is handling two huge pioneers of green energy, hydrogen and ammonia. MSC 111 approved interim guidelines for both, but the approaches are carefully tailored to their specific risks. For hydrogen, we now have interim guidelines focused purely on the safety of ships using it as fuel. But then contrast that with ammonia. Ammonia is highly toxic, right? So the interim guidelines for using ammonia cargo as fuel on gas carriers have one very specific main focus: ensuring the absolute safety of the crew and the ship in areas outside the cargo zones. Here's the catch, though. A state-of-the-art green engine is completely useless and potentially really dangerous without a crew that actually knows how to run it. MSC 111 tackled this human element head-on. They approved new interim guidelines for training seafarers on ships using ammonia as well as methyl and ethyl alcohols as fuel. Because at the end of the day, technology is only ever as good as the people operating it, and this ensures our workforce evolves right alongside the machinery. Which brings us to Section 4, upgrading mandatory safety rules. Let's ground ourselves back in the present day for a minute and look at the hull and gear. These are the foundational, mandatory safety upgrades applying across the entire industry. I know this looks like a bit of an alphabet soup, but let's walk through why these updates literally save lives. First up, the LSA code. They've updated the testing for free-fall lifeboats. When these lifeboats are tested using simulation equipment and suddenly stop on the skid, there is massive shock loading. The new rules now mandate the testing arrangements have a minimum safety factor of 6, which is huge for preventing fatal accidents. Next, the IMDG code brings much clearer criteria for transporting electric vehicles and batteries, a really critical issue given some of the recent maritime fires we've seen. Under SOLAS, we have clarifications ensuring distress and safety info goes out over all operational recognized mobile satellite services. And finally, the IP code sets a consistent dimensioning weight of 90 kilograms for industrial personnel, including their gear, making sure stability calculations are accurate and uniform across the board. We also saw the introduction of VDS into SOLAS Chapter 5. This stands for the VHF Data Exchange System. Right now, it's a voluntary digital alternative to the traditional AIS tracking system. VDS is this highly secure, reliable digital communication system operating over the VHF band. It combines tracking with dedicated application-specific messages and satellite data exchange. Basically, it's like upgrading a ship's communication from an old-school basic pager to a fully secure smartphone network. And technology is even changing how we physically inspect these massive bulk carriers and oil tankers. The 2011 ESP code was updated to officially allow remote inspection techniques, or RITs, for close-up surveys. This means surveyors can now inspect complex structural parts using tools like drones or robotic crawlers. It completely eliminates the need for direct and very often dangerous physical access by a human surveyor. It's a real game changer. Before we move on from safety, we absolutely have to talk about passenger ships. MSC 111 approved revised explanatory notes for the safe return to port concept. Because passenger ships have incredibly complex infrastructure, if a vessel suffers a fire or a flood, the safe return to port regulations ensure the ship can still return to port under its own power, and most importantly, provide a safe area for everyone on board. These new notes cover the whole life cycle of these systems, from the early design phase all the way through to onboard testing and operations.
Section 5, Timeline to the Future. We've covered a ton of ground here. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture to see exactly when these sweeping regulations become our daily reality. Let's walk through how this builds out. On July 1, 2026, the non-mandatory mass code takes effect. This officially kicks off what the IMO calls an experience building phase. Basically, the industry is going to use this time to collect operational data and really test these autonomous systems out in the real world. Then, on January 1, 2028, those critical mandatory safety amendments we just discussed, like the lifeboat testing and the EV transport rules, those officially enter into force. Finally, looking ahead to 2032, that is the earliest planned date for the mass code to become strictly mandatory, armed with all the data we'll have gathered during that experience building phase.
Which brings us to one final, really critical thought. The regulatory framework is finally racing forward to meet the technology. But with rules advancing this rapidly and the experience building phase right around the corner, how fast will the industry actually adopt these sweeping changes? The ship of the future has been designed and the rulebook has been written. Now it's completely up to the shipbuilders and operators to bring it all to life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the horizon.